Hello, good morning and welcome to this Logistics Manager webinar, today sponsored by Honeywell. I'm Chris Walton, your host for today and editor of Logistics Manager. Our webinar today is entitled Preparing Your Warehouse for New World Challenges. History shows that major global disruptors can accelerate market changes much sooner than anticipated, and the events of 2020 are no exception. We are certainly in a new world. Since the UK entered lockdown in March, consumer buying habits have shifted significantly, most noticeably towards online fulfillment models. And even though restrictions are slowly being lifted, that trend is here to stay. As a result, many distribution centre operations directors are now faced with managing these expectations at the same time as adapting to emerging workplace safety requirements. As the UK adjusts to this new normal, innovative strategies will be required to succeed in this environment. By watching this webinar, you will learn what it takes to succeed in the new world. To that end, we have a great speaker with a unique insight on how to leverage voice technology for these new world challenges. Daryl Williams is Sales Director for Europe at Honeywell Voice. Daryl is responsible for business operations across 34 countries in almost every industrial sector. He'll demonstrate how Honeywell can work with you to meet new warehouse safety protocols, streamline warehouse operations to meet varying customer requirements, and prepare for future challenges and adapt to evolving challenges. Most importantly, this webinar is interactive, and we are keen to hear your questions and quandaries when it comes to preparing your warehouse for new world challenges. So I would urge you to ask questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box right on the bottom of your screen. I'll be able to see your questions and I'll pose them to Daryl at the end of the presentation. I'll also be urging you to exercise your democratic rights and vote in this webinar. We've got several short poll questions that will pop up on your screen, so don't be alarmed. Just tick your chosen answer and we'll share the findings with you as we go along. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Daryl Williams at Honeywell Voice. Over to you, Daryl.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here. I'm hopefully that we will get that input from the whole team. So if I can ask you to move the slides forward. Well, Chris has already introduced me, so I won't dwell on this one. So let's move on, please. So before we kick this off, let's start with a positive. The 21st century continues with the 20th century left off. Unprecedented advancements in technology, evolution and innovation, and a faster rate of change than ever before. There's great things for many people in many walks of life. However, 2020 has also shown its darker side with the COVID pandemic. Now, I believe that how we come together and work together and learn from each other is what will ultimately define our success in the face of this adversity. So today, we'll talk a little bit about supply chain influences, and notably about one of the proven solutions that has enabled many of our critical businesses to remain effective during the events of 2020 and the future. So to our agenda, we'll review some of the common characteristics experienced in consumer behavior in the first half of 2020, and how we can be ready for the new normal demands in the warehouse. Next slide, please. But before we get into the weeds, let's set the scene and recap on our observations of the year to date. So 2020, the lockdown has put unprecedented pressure on supply chain and retail business in general. Stores were closed, then limited opening, and initially certain product shortages. For me, this meant essentials like pasta, tin goods, and of course, toilet rolls. But when shoppers were allowed in store, habits changed overnight. Dave Lewis at Tesco's reported that the value of each shop had doubled, literally overnight, but the frequency of the visits declined. So the once a week, twice a month, big basket trips became the new normal, and this has far-reaching consequences on the entire supply chain. On top of this complication, we had the irony of a prolonged heat wave, a summer season in the springtime lockdown, and that further threw a spanner in the product mix planning for our entire end-to-end chain. Finally, uncertainty. When or if, where would there be a return to normal? This is a major disruptor to what we envisage the future to look like. Next, please. So let's talk of the top observations that we heard from our customers over the last few months. As mentioned previously, certain products were just not available. Now, I've been lucky in my life. Even though my parents were not well off, we were always able to get the basics. And for those of you who are as old as me, we used to shop in small grocery stores long before the advent of super or hypermarkets. And of course, it wasn't 7 days a week either. So it was a massive shock to me to have to queue to get into a supermarket and then to see several 30-meter aisles, 4 shelves high, with absolutely nothing on them. Let's think about that for a minute. Has anyone ever seen that before? Well, this was a wake-up for the world, if you like, just how important the supply chain engine is to everyday life. But maybe it's just human nature to store and hoard. Still, panic buying was a thing for quite a few weeks. Now, IRI's research backed this up. The statistics, sorry, next slide. IRI's research backed this up. The statistics on the pandemic spread and the date of implementation of lockdowns per region, shown here by CPG sales. And we saw an 8% increase in the UK due to panic buying. And remember, this is just March, so that was effectively 1 to 1.5 weeks. So we didn't have that capacity in our supply chain. So how were businesses in the supply chain supposed to deal with that curveball? So as Chris mentioned earlier, next slide, it's participation time. We've heard from the analysts, but I'd like to hear from the real world on how this impacted you guys. We're conducting a live straw poll. You should see some options on screen, and I'd ask for some feedback. Yep, we talked mostly about retail and consumer behavior, and I'm aware that some of you operate in different spaces. But in terms of total throughput of your business, purely as a result of panic buying, what did you experience? Was there any change? And by little change, I mean less than 5% either way, although I'm aware that's a big quantity. Did you see an increase of 5 to 20, 21 to 45, or an increase of more than 46%? Or indeed, did business decrease for you? So if you would please click one of the buttons. And as we wait for the results to come through. So the results are on screen now. I think all of you, I don't know if all of you can see these results, but we're showing that the majority of people, 48% of you, saw an increase of between 5 and 20%. Now that is borne out by the analysts, but there are a proportion of you who saw significant increases and less who saw less. So thank you for your input in there. So we can go to the next slide. So what were the effects of panic buying on the warehouse? Well, we saw the increased pressure on essential retail warehouse to begin with, groceries. They were the only stores that were open. They had to ramp up to keep those shelves from being empty. That's a scary scenario. That meant they needed extra staff, and they needed extra staff who knew what they were doing. So there was a burden of training because standards had to be maintained. Extra equipment was needed to move the product to get those staff effective. And of course, all of this with the overlay of unprecedented safety and hygiene standards, mixed advice, but definitely looking after our workforce. So a really big burden of panic buying on the warehouse. Next, please. The second key observation was all about online and e-commerce. Driven by the ability and health considerations, we saw an unprecedented surge in grocery online shopping. Dave Lewis again noted that, driven by demand, Tesco were able to increase online deliveries by about 103% in those first few weeks. And while Tesco's efforts were by no means unique, demand continued to outstrip supply. And even now, it seems, there's a challenge to book a premium slot. Now, internet retailing groups say this is likely to continue with predictions of growth in online grocery being as high as 30 to 35% this year. Who would bet against them at this point? Now, outside of grocery, non-food shopping has also seen a seismic change. Accessibility being the key differentiator, I think. Whilst we've seen online year-on-year growth in the UK, this is something new. Non-essential stores were closed. The warehouse truly became the consumer's touch point and the only way to buy many goods. May saw a record growth of almost 20% month on month, and other predictions are estimating a 200% year-on-year growth in non-food. Now that is a seminal moment. So sorry, next slide. Not everyone was set up for online business, nor was there a capacity in warehouses, transportation, and even in the labor markets to deal with this demand. Whilst key services such as foodstuffs and pharma were largely maintained, there has been a massive impact across Europe and the globe with regards to lost sales. And yet perhaps the UK's relatively early adoption of omni-channel buying behaviour may have helped soften the impact for us. However, given all of that, it's estimated by Zen Cargo that the UK retail industry lost over £250 million in sales in March and April alone. And this is having serious implications for us all as we move forward through the year. Many of you will have seen that John Lewis, often considered the retail anchor tenant and synonymous with prosperity of a region, was already considering resizing due to growth of online and click and collect. Now, unfortunately, they've announced the closure of 8 stores with many job losses, and they cite overall declining sales. But conversely, they also say 84% increase in online sales in that same period. So there is that seismic shift. Next, please. So outside of the first days of panic buying, and for those of you who are involved in e-commerce value chains, have you seen a change in your online order volumes between March and May? So we kind of have the same poll questions, and I'm really interested in your responses. This is like the excitement of Eurovision as we wait for the results. Okay, so what impact did this online order volume have? Well, this is an even bigger increase, and it's to be expected. I think pretty much 90% saw little change or an increase, with the biggest increases being between 20 and 45%. So definitely backing up what the analysts have been telling us, which is good, but shows that we've all been impacted very heavily. So next slide. So what were the effects of e-commerce on our warehouses? Well, similar effects caused the panic buying, but this time with a much longer term impact. And additionally, and adding more unwanted pressure to the warehouse, it's now the last touch point before customers experience their purchased products, and the burden of satisfaction falls squarely on the warehouse worker. Consumers have long memories and the ability to be heard on social media, and so customer satisfaction, customer retention and loyalty will continue to be of paramount importance, and there will be no forgiveness of the substandard service. And of course, all this now falls on the warehouse. So again, looking quickly at the effects, a pressure to ramp up to meet this change in demand, but making sure customers have the right goods on time. I think someone mentioned to me about the warehouse now being a brand ambassador because the emotion is there in purchase. Extra staff, of course, the training to make sure these things are carried out well, effectively and on time, the equipment needed, and then a slight change, the adaptation of moving maybe from bulk store deliveries to individual orders. That's a big change for the average warehouse. Delivery services and transportations are also heavily impacted. And then we have that monster, returns. That's something we'll talk about a little bit later. And of course, the requirement still to have a safe working environment to look after our people with ever-changing advice, but keeping the hygiene standards. Next slide, please. So our third observation is optimistically titled, Back to the High Street. Are we getting back to some sort of normality? Well, some consumers, starved of retail therapy, queued for 5 hours before the opening time to get in some stores. And of course, we see queues with limited numbers allowed in at any one time. Undoubtedly, there was a surge in high street sales, but zero to what level? As a nation and as an economy, we nervously await the results. With social distancing, shorter opening hours, and a limited number of customers, many retailers, both food and non-food, have echoed Jeff Bezos' sentiment and commented that it's good to be back, but their operating models will need to change significantly, as operating under these conditions with more staff and less turnover per shop ahead is far more costly than business as usual. Next, please. So we get to our third and final poll. So we kind of worked you hard already. Again, accepting we're not all impacted by this retail situation. What changes have you seen with regards to stores beginning to reopen? It's the volume of business that this is causing and easing of lockdown. So what impact has it had on you? If you'd like to vote again, please. Okay, so the result generally says that from little change to a significant change is around the 82% mark. So again, what we've expected and what we've heard from our customers, but putting the burden clearly back on you. So going to the next slide, we can review the effects of this moving back to the high street. So as we've noted earlier, we still await meaningful data from customers and business analysts, but you have voted. And what we've heard to date suggests that a change in priorities is likely in the operation of the warehouse. But what is the impact? Well, again, similar story, but with subtle variations. Perhaps lower bulk volumes, but more diverse throughput, with more customized value-add services, those services being carried out by a warehouse worker. It seems that the performance with on-tap agility in the warehouse is becoming more and more critical for business growth and perhaps business survival. Next. So perhaps the journey into the unknown is a little too dramatic, maybe too Jules Verne, but early indications strongly suggest it won't be the same old, same old. So we ask, what will we need for tomorrow? Online and e-commerce growth seems set to continue. The high street as we know it is currently and sadly in decline, with leading brands such as Boots, Debenhams, Victoria's Secret, Morrison's downsizing, going into administration or shutting completely, not to mention the closure of countless local businesses. Social distance will continue in some form, and our attitude to personal space and hygiene may be forever altered, and then the spectre of another incident or a second wave. Are we prepared? Are we able to adapt? Are we ready for the unexpected? Next. Honeywell offer a range of solutions for DC operations, ranging from fully automated sites to robotics to the simple barcode. I'm going to focus on the easiest to adopt competitive advantage that is voice technology and how its agility and performance addresses the challenges we're facing in 2020 and beyond. Many of you will be familiar with guided working. However, as a recap for any newbies, voice as a basic concept is a user interface, a natural way of directing workers' activity, of giving them the right information to a worker exactly when they need it, and allowing the worker to confirm via simple spoken responses what they've done. Think of it like a sat-nav in a car. You get the right information just before you need it, one step at a time. But of course, you don't have to look at the screen here. So voice directs workers to move safely and efficiently, guided by instructions as they move. It frees up two hands to do the job. It removes unnecessary actions like key presses, reading off screens, keyboard scanning, or even juggling pen and paper, and allows for faster and more accurate working. That leads to customer satisfaction and higher profitability. The voice-guided instruction allows any activity to be followed, even by the newest recruit. Next, please. That said, new solutions to business challenges should be focused on delivering value, not on the technology. When considering a voice implementation, treat it like any other business improvement project. Understand what you're trying to do, what you need to achieve, and then make an informed decision. So, our voice solutions, they put your empowered workers where you need them, armed with the right information to be effective. Voice integrates to all major systems, to ERPs, WMSs, that's warehouse management systems, and often with a native interface, and is capable of connecting to multiple host business systems at one time, which creates a common user experience for any task, whether it's voice and screen, or screen-based. A choice of mobile and PC-based platforms use fit-for-purpose technology in harmony. So you have voice with RFID, you have voice-controlled AGVs, voice and scanning used together, voice and camera and screens and paternosters and cobots. Well, you get the idea. There's a business justification suite. A business information suite that can give you detailed information on how jobs are actually carried out by real people rather than just the theory. enabling warehouse reorganizations, for example, based on the number of steps taken by a worker, as opposed to the total elapsed time. Very, very powerful. And then we have a rapid training tool that talks workers through a task one step at a time, validating every step of their work. And then it continues to coach them every time they do the task with simple guidance every day. Our customers tell us that newbies in their businesses are often up to full speed in days or even hours, whereas before voice, it was weeks or months. And lastly, truly fit for purpose, hyper rugged hardware, water resistant, rated to minus 30 degrees, or heat for any environment. Next, please. So I've lectured you on how you should approach a potential voice implementation. But what is our approach? What does good look like from our experience? Well, we look to standardize tasks. We look for repeatability of workflows. That's done for efficiency and to make them represent your best business planning. But then we optimize. We add people-based best practice and the ergonomics of the system that designers often overlook when they're just working in code. And then we look for flawless execution, perhaps also known as compliance. We keep the workers on task. We keep them on the process. We validate their work in real time and ensure no corners are cut, no steps or checks can be missed. And on top of that, there's options for reporting and predictive analytics to identify potential bottlenecks and other performance limiting issues, allowing continuous improvement. Next, please. Thinking back to what we've seen in the first half of this year, well, voice is a natural and effective, easy to use interface. We've all been talking since we were children. Our customers often report 15 to 30% plus increases in productivity. They also tell of huge accuracy improvements, often exceeding 99.9%. We talked already of shortened training and onboarding that opens up labor markets, including where technology skills, literacy, or languages are a challenge to other solutions. Continuous improvement and KPI dashboards are effective management tools that are included, and a true multi-skilled workforce ready for any challenge in any process and any workflow and anything that may be presented to your business. Next, please. Well, voice lends itself to almost any activity executed by a person, both in traditional warehousing as well as maintenance, service, QA, audits, inspection, anywhere where user focus, timely and relevant information exchange is important. As such, it fits perfectly for tasks like selecting and picking orders, be they online or other, and also every other distribution center activity, such as the agility of the voice system, that one-off activities even, specialized working, kitting types of jobs can be handled easily by a now multi-skilled operator, because we lead the operator through every required step. And of course, it validates at every step to ensure compliance. Specific to online and the B2C challenges we've discussed today, voice is extremely powerful for individual order preparation. And of course, why pick one customer order when you could pick 3, 6, or 10 at the time, all directed and validated? And again, a characteristic of e-commerce, the dreaded returns. Our customers already report a reduction in errors, meaning less of our fault returns. But the nature of voice also helps with the traditional high percentage of I'll order 2 customer returns that can be as high as 50%, where item-specific checks are spoken on the returns department to enable them to inspect any product and get it ready for sale in the shortest possible time. So next, please. Voice, as we touched on, by its very nature, offers that hands-free operation, meaning your hands are free to handle safely whatever task you're assigned. But voice also offers that eyes-up working, meaning you're focusing on what you're doing and looking where you're going, which is important if you drive a forklift, while simultaneously getting your instructions and completing your job, or even just walking in a congested area to your next job. Again, our customers report significant reductions in accidents and incidents when voice is deployed, and this contributes to a safer, more efficient environment for your people. Next. So a bit of relief from my talking right now. We've got a brief video, and this demonstrates a worker using voice without any physical interaction with his equipment. It also starts with him getting something wrong and being asked to get it right, much to his embarrassment. Notice how he's able to handle some unusual product with both hands without having to juggle with pens, papers, scanners, which was the old way. Run the video, please.
286. You said 286, wrong barcode, ready to try again.
Description?
Description is scenario 300GR point. Confirm 3 digits.
218. 784.
Pick 1.
1.
2, correct.
Yes.
Confirming.
1.
1, correct.
Yes.
Confirming, please wait. Go to 131 Alpha, say ready.
Ready.
You did see the worker being, you saw him being told what to do in his ear, carrying it out, making his mistake, having to put it back and carry on with his work. All of the time, his hands available to handle what is quite a fragile product, an unusual warehouse, to say the least. So let's go to the next slide. As I may have said earlier, I'm proud of how we supported almost all of the major European grocers and their DC operations to keep the food flowing this year, despite the challenges we've been talking about today. More important than ever is the ability to work normally with face masks and to ensure that all recommended health guidelines are followed. Voice is unaffected by these precautions. But this is not a new feature. We've had workers using face coverings for years, although I confess, mainly for comfort purposes, when they worked in freezer environments where the average temperature is minus 30 degrees. Next. So whilst we have the ability via software to direct workers to specific places, for example, to direct a worker to aisle 3 as aisle 2, which would have been their next job, as a spillage or there's a forklift working there, we are releasing a new feature that expands on simple practicalities and will help with social distance compliance. Social distancing, proximity sensing, can check the distance to another worker, can alert users and management of any breach to local guidelines, and also certify good working practices. Any transgressions, of course, can also be tracked for analysis and for retraining purposes. Next slide, please. Finally, best practice. Best practice should be an aspiration, a journey, not a destination. I've already talked the philosophy of adding value at all points and not charging headlong into technology solutions, but to consider other factors as well. So yes, we're all about empowering our most important resource, our people. Yes, we improve on safety and compliance. Yes, we provide workers with just-in-time information and step-by-step guidance about any activity. And yes, we provide unlimited agility to adapt and to scale to trends, to seasonal demand, and even to the 2020 challenges. But we also provide people with a friendly ergonomic solution and full guidance to use them in a safe and hygienic way. For example, have your own personal hygiene elements like the headband and mouthpieces. Share only the most expensive electronics. And that, as you saw in our video, they never get touched. And it's very difficult to do that with a scanner, a tablet, or a laptop PC. We also provide cleaning routines and advice to contribute to a safer worker experience, as well as simple ideas on practicalities, on layouts to minimize congestion and to enable social distancing. Next. So as you've heard, voice is an investment in the future of your business, in your customers, and in your people. It's a super agile and fully scalable option for any activity. It's well-liked and easily adopted solution, a solution that addresses the challenges of today and the ever-changing needs of tomorrow. So that's generally all from me, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions you have now, or you can reach out to myself or my colleagues for more specific discussions. So I think to questions.
Daryl, thank you so much for that. That was fascinating. And apologies there for the issue with the sound on the video, but I believe we've fixed that now, so we should be able to go back and watch that.
286.
You said 286, wrong barcode, ready to try again.
Description?
Description is scenario 300GR point. Confirm 3 digits.
218. 784.
Pick 1.
1.
2, correct.
Yes.
Confirming.
1.
1, correct.
Yes.
Confirming, please wait. Go to 131 Alpha, say ready.
Ready.
So before we get into stuck into questions, let me just remind everybody that you'll be able to watch this webinar on demand on logisticsmanager.com from this afternoon. So please share it around with your colleagues if you've enjoyed it, and don't be shy. Put some questions in the question box, and I'll be able to field them to Daryl. So first up, just off the back of your presentation there, Daryl, A question's come in. So if you have a 20-user warehouse operation, say for example, multi-user site, how would you know if voice technology is a good fit for your business?
Well, it's a great question, one we've been asked many times before, because voice used to be seen as a complicated solution, only suitable for the largest operations, but it's simply not the case. As I touched on the presentation, there's great efficiency gains to be made by process engineering, or as I like to put it, making the best business processes fit for human use. But also voice adds huge benefits in itself as the technology. So for anyone who wants to do a test at home, take 2 stopwatches into your warehouse, time a piece of work being done. The first stopwatch times the start to the finish elapsed time. The second warehouse, use it to record what I like to call dead time. Dead time are actions carried out by people that are not actually getting the job done. So some examples of this would be the person reading from a list, a picking list, for example, maybe scanning locations, maybe stopping to check he's in the right place, entering or writing down quantities that have been moved or picked. And there are many, many more dead time activities, things that aren't actually moving the job forward. So then take the dead time on the 1 stopwatch, divide it by the total time, and there is a real life indication carried out by you and your people in your warehouse of the percentage of time that you could save. And that is an immediate efficiency saving. Very often we're going to see something between 10 and 20 or 30% just on that measure alone. And that's without process engineering. So obviously you're then going to want to call us in, get a full process evaluation, and we'll help you look at that opportunity, that task, and maybe a few others. But try the 2 stopwatch test at home, and then call me and tell me how good it is. I hope that covers it.
Yeah, next questions come in, Daryl. So can voice work with a cloud-based WMS, warehouse management system?
Yep, and absolutely it can. For many, many years, we've had hosting and distance hosting. All of the new systems coming out now are cloud-based. And yes, you will run it as you will run anything else. It's modern architecture, fully integrated to whatever is coming along. Again, speak to us about the WMS you have in mind, and we'll tell you exactly how far and what functionality is available out of the box. And yeah, look forward to talking to you. Thank you for that question.
Excellent. Just questions come in on the returns piece as well. So you were talking about returns in the warehouse. So could you elaborate a little bit, Daryl? They've asked on how this exactly works.
Yeah, so returns are they're a tricky, necessary, unfortunately necessary position. When catalogs used to exist, they used to count on 50 to 60% of returns, things coming back. And as we move back to address people ordering directly on fulfillment direct from warehouses, we're going to have to deal with an increasing amount of returns. But what is a return and why is it different from any other process? Well, when you have something back, you don't know it's coming back. So you'll find something, you have to identify it, and then it has characteristics. So voice works really well by identifying the product and then delivering the characteristics, or if you like, the checks that need to be done on that particular product straight to the person who's carrying it out. And this person doesn't have to be skilled. They don't have to know all your product. If something comes back and it's an item of clothing, for example, they're told what to check for. Check for condition, check for cleanliness, check for original packing. And then they are also then told, is it good, is it bad? If it's good, put it back in stock or send it to an outlet. Often these things get sold secondhand, get sold via outlets. But that returns process is 5 to 8 times more costly than the initial outbound process. So the more you can add the de-skilling of that and the reactivity and the agility to it, it really delivers the information directly to the person who's doing it at any one time. So it just speeds up the process and makes that product available for sale, reducing inventory and dead stock.
There's another question coming, Daryl, inspired by the cloud-based WMS question, I would imagine, saying, is voice a true cloud-based solution, or does it require an on-site server?
So there are multiple architectures available. Historically, we've had a local server, a local server for user management, not for the whole business, but just for user management, which will enable us to make sure that performance is exactly where we need it. We have in the past had maybe 2,000 people logging on at one point, and that was important. Now with the advent of technology and the move forward of technology, we are able to host entirely in the cloud, and everything can be operated that way.
Absolutely. I'd also now urge, we've only got a few minutes left, so if you want to get your questions in, do fire some questions in right now. That would be fantastic. But one question that has come in is asked if you could elaborate on the no-touch way of working, especially in relation to the use of the equipment. This particular person runs a multi-shift operation where people need to share devices.
Yeah, this is another good question, and one that you should always consider. What we saw in the video, although I'm not sure, Chris, we actually heard the words even in the second time round, but what you saw was a guy who was carrying out his activities, wearing a headset, and just responding to instructions he was given, responding and telling the system what he was doing, and then being guided through it. So no touch there is very simply, he didn't have a pen and paper. He didn't have a screen. He didn't have a laptop. He didn't have to be scanning things. He wasn't touching the product. Now, right now, that has hygiene and safety implications that are really positive. It also has some great benefits, if you like, for multi-shift. So we know the guy is wearing a headset. Let him keep his headset. The expensive electronics that we talked of on one of the slides earlier, they can be shared, but we let each person have their own consumable, if you like, their own safety gear. In much the way they'll have their own face mask, they have just the elements that are very personal to them. And the investment that's gone into the business is easily shared and hasn't been touched, probably hasn't had a human hand on it, and that can be shared out across multiple shifts. So it's reusing elements of the solution that are insulated, if you like, and giving individuals their own personal consumable items and still be able to operate at 100% efficiency. So kind of a bit mixed up way, but you don't touch the equipment. And for anything that's personal to you, keep it personal to you.
One fascinating question's just come in. How does voice compare with vision picking?
Again, a very good example, and I think I mentioned earlier that voice works with other technologies, and indeed, voice is the driver behind a lot of vision systems. But we've got vision capabilities. What we found is when we talk to our customers about their environments and we find out exactly what they want, the vision can be a useful add-on, but doesn't actually replace the activity that carries out your day-to-day work. Voice would normally be used to drive vision, but it doesn't have the drawbacks. It isn't an extra piece of equipment. Voice is something you can use repeatedly in a high performance, high transactional business, and vision isn't quite there. Voice is easily acceptable because, as I mentioned, we've all been talking since we were maybe 1 year old or less. Vision takes some getting used to, and in some cases, there are concerns about the effect it has on the people. But we will use voice where it adds a demonstrable value. We're all about adding value, but even then, voice is driving the vision. So I think I would say at this time, even the people who look to adopt vision early on use voice as their mainstay and will perhaps overlay a vision system on top where some specific need needs to be answered. But again, we're open to technology if it solves the problem at hand, if it adds value, and if it allows our businesses to operate better. But there are no barriers to what we can use in the business.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's it in terms of questions that have come through. So I will, unless anybody else wants to get a question in quickly, I'll bring this webinar to an end. So I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I'd like to thank you, Daryl, Sales Director for Europe at Honeywell Voice, for your time and expertise this morning. Just if we could look on the next slide, please. A few things that are coming up from us. Our next webinar is how to achieve supply chain agility through digitization, which is sponsored by Blue Jay Solutions, which takes place at 2 p.m. on the 23rd of July. In this webinar, you'll discover how to manage shifts in demand and transportation patterns, use data to drive operations through the importance of visibility, and introduce agility into your supply chain to make business more profitable. So look out for an email in your inbox soon in order to register. Also would like to remind everybody that the entries are still open for the Supply Chain Excellence Awards 2020. Every year we find astonishing winners achieving true excellence in the supply chain, and we anticipate a true celebration of all accomplishments, easy for me to say, in this year of all years. So go to supplychainexcellenceawards.com for more information, and we look forward to welcoming all those shortlisted to the London Hilton on Park Lane on the 12th of November. And finally, it would be remiss of me again to not remind you that a recording of this webinar will be available on logisticsmanager.com from this afternoon, so you can catch up and share with colleagues. And that's it. So thank you again for attending this webinar. Thanks to Honeywell, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.